I think a willingness to be bored is going to be the name of this episode. I heard that and a bell went off in my head. Today on a very special It's Just a Show, we watched a movie. Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, featuring this island, Earth.
More like the silent mirth. Get it?
No. Well, you chuckled quietly throughout the movie.
The mirth was non-existent.
Oh yeah, Jonathan Winters is not in this movie. But first, as always, follow-up.
So, Adam, last time we talked about your brand new podcast about horror movies made in Canada, but a little birdie told me that you also appeared as a guest on This Is Your Mixtape.
Yes, my reputation as the hardest working man in show business is paying off. Yes, I have made an appearance on a friend of the show, Michael's podcast, This Is Your Mixtape, available, as all the best podcasts are, from the Megaphonic Network. And we, as is always the case with that show, talked about 5 songs representing 5 different stages of my life, you know, from mewling and puking in the nurse's arms until second infancy. But I don't know anything about music, so I mostly just talked about horror movies.
Yes, the theme from Halloween is a very important theme throughout, and it made me really appreciate that lovely little synth number.
Yes. I think one of the things that won me over to the movie ParaNorman, when I saw trailers for that a few years ago, I missed it because it was in theaters for about a week. That thing seemed to tank hard, but I've loved it on Netflix. One of the things that got me outside is one of the very early jokes featured in the trailer was that the title character's ringtone was the Halloween theme.
So people should totally check that out. And just generally, This Is Your Mixtape is a very fun concept. People to think about their lives in terms of music. I'm on there at some point too. There's some bigger guests there.
Yeah, Chris. He's taller than you.
Is he? Anyway.
Yes, I'm taller than you. Like 3 inches taller than you.
All right, fair enough. But yes, Michael is a really good host, and there's always a great back and forth. So totally check it out.
Oh, and in the words of Columbo, but one more thing. On a note of Halloween and a bit of follow-up to our last episode. So I found it something fun and interesting. I was listening to the Halloween special of the Dana Gould Hour podcast. And Gould, of course, a sometimes writer for this show. Mm-hmm. And guess where the best place in LA to go to for trick-or-treating is? Rick Baker's house.
Really?
Yeah.
What does he do?
He just decks out the place because he's a crazy makeup man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he apparently puts on a very cool set of decorations for getting in the proper Halloween spirit. And from what I understand, gives some very good candies for all the boys and ghouls.
Well, there's this movie that was made into a movie out of a movie. Should we talk about it?
Otherwise, it's just 58 minutes of dead air. Dinner parties are so awkward, aren't they? Especially when you're sitting across from an old flame who's giving you the cold shoulder. Oh, also a bunch of space aliens who've got foreheads like Tyra Banks. Anywho, this is the situation Studley science man Carl Meacham finds himself in after said space aliens lure him to their palatial estates in a driverless plane. Yes, This Island Earth fans, I'm skipping the first act of the movie where Cal and his briefly seen sidekick build a goofy video phone. Instead, I jump to where the story starts. You know, the way a competent screenwriter would. Don't at me, Joe Dante. Exeter's the head of our 5-head aliens, though you wouldn't know it from all the flack he gets from Brack, Exeter's bitchy assistant. Exeter has gotten Cal, his aforementioned old flame Ruth, the professor from Gilligan's Island, and a bunch of extras to do a scientific conference to end World War. But which world and which war, Exeter? Ruth, Cal's aforementioned old flame, later confides in him. Neither she nor TV's the professor trust the aliens. The 3 humans try to escape in a vehicle that resembles the 3-wheeled car Mr. Bean is always knocking over. Brack's able to pull up their escape and attempt to stop it on his alien video toaster, and he fries the car with his War of the Worlds rays. Cal and Ruth escape, but the professor won't live to see the Harlem Globetrotters beat those basketball-playing robots on Gilligan's Island. Let's jump ahead again to outer space. Exeter takes Cal and Ruth on a ride in his beautiful UFO. They're off to Exeter and Brack's home planet of Metaluna, which is in ruins after war with the unseen Zagon alien race. Metalunans have been coming to Earth because they're low on the uranium they need to keep Metaluna in one piece until all Metalunans can relocate to Earth. Cal and Ruth are not interested in playing an interplanetary game of lemmings with all these weird five-head aliens. They try to escape, but are blocked off by a clawed, bug-eyed alien named Mutant. Given his sluggishness and penchant for wearing jodhpurs, Mutant is easily the wackest of all the Universal movie monsters. Exeter helps the two escape and helps them in their return to Earth, but he's mortally wounded by Mutant. Turns out the trip was for naught, as Metaluna and all its inhabitants are wiped out by Zagons or comets or something. Cal and Ruth land safely on Earth, while Exeter burns alive in his spaceship. But what of the looming terror of the Zagons, you ask? Oh, don't worry, the United Nations Intelligence Task Force wiped them out in 1975. The end.
And now the host segments, or something like them. In the opening to the movie, the satellite of love hovers majestically over Earth. And then, in one of the many nods to Kubrick's 2001 in this opening, we see Mike jogging horizontally? Turns out he's running on a hamster wheel for exercise, complete with a hanging bottle for him to sip out of when he's done. Gypsy comes to give him a daily update, including the fact that a delicious lamb roast with sweet yams are in the oven. Tom Servo pops up to ask Mike how things are going, and then strongly suggests that things are not nominal. Why? Well, perhaps because Crow is heading to the basement with a pickaxe. Cut to Crow with World War I style Brody helmet singing Long Way to Tipperary while he jabs through the innards of the ship in an attempt to tunnel back to Earth.
It's a long way to Tipperary.
Luckily, when Crow inevitably breaches the hull, Tom Servo manages to block the hole with his hover skirt. Then the evil Dr. Forrester calls for them. He forces them to bow down before sending him off to his latest movie, This Island Earth. Their viewing of the movie is interrupted by a technical mishap, and while waiting for Dr. Forrester to smooth things out, Mike and the bots discuss the movie. Mike notes that if he was in a failing plane, like the movie's hero Cal, he'd be able to get out of it just fine. Crow and Tom take the bet, goading him into taking over piloting the satellite of love from Gypsy. It goes well for about 5 seconds. Then the SOL runs into the Hubble Space Telescope. Mike then uses the manipulator arm to dislodge the Hubble. That also doesn't go well. While watching the movie, Tom Servo casually notes that his interocitor is a lot better than what the Metalunans have on their ship. Mike insists that they immediately find it so they can get back to Earth. They enter into Servo's quarters, which are a bit cluttered, and which includes a collection of boxer shorts. Lo and behold, he really does have an interocitor, and when they fire it up, they accidentally contact a Metaluna man who is just finishing his shower. They ask if they can help him return to Earth, but Mr. Showercap can only manage to repeatedly fire a laser at Servo's head. The exchange is interrupted by Dr. Forrester.
Surprise! Like who doesn't have an interocitor, you collective heads of knuckle? Now get back in the theater, you nitty hammers!
At the conclusion of the movie, Mike and the bots are uncharacteristically cheerful. The movie, they declare, was an absolute breeze. Dr. Forrester is unpleasantly surprised because he was expecting Mike's will to be completely broken. Instead, Mike and the bots enjoy a little Metaluna mixer. Forrester attempts to crash the party using the interocitor, but he accidentally transports Showercap Guy to Deep 13. As Crow and Servo note, with Forrester gone, I guess that means they'll never get back to Earth.
You know, Metalunan Man is my favorite Melvin Van Peebles movie.
Very good.
That's a joke that 3 people will get, which makes it very different from the jokes in this movie.
Just as a side note, was the interocitor ever used to transport people?
No, it's not. I guess that's the sign. Perhaps, the writers at Best Brains just didn't pay enough attention to this movie.
That's maybe a good place to start. What do you think of this movie?
What do I think of This Island Earth or Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie?
Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie.
Well, I have to remove some nostalgia here because I was exposed to this from the tenderest, weeest age of but 12, and I totally fell in love with it and fell in love with the concept. So this was my gateway drug. And I will say, as a gateway drug to Mystery Science Theater, I think this is really good. It's paced very well. It's an exciting, colorful movie, and the host segments are a lot more polished visually, so that anyone who would be put off by the crude opening theme songs of the show as usual would be a lot more comfortable giving this a go. as watching it as, I guess, an experienced Misty, boy, it feels weird saying that. It's solid. It's I think a pretty good episode of the show, and I think that the main thing it has going for it is, well, it's got two things that I think make it kind of stand above certain episodes. One is the aforementioned production values. Mm-hmm. The host segments look great. I love this rendition of the Satellite of Love and its interiors and the door sequence. This is as great as the show gets in terms of visuals.
Yeah.
And the other thing, perhaps inevitably, is the person whose shoulders this movie is on. Not, as you would think, Mike Nelson, but Trace Beaulieu.
Why do you say that?
He's given the lion's share of stuff to do in the movie.
I guess that's true.
He has to introduce the concept and be funny in like 2 minutes and get people ready for it. I think he does a great job. If this was the last thing that Trace did in terms of what was released, canonically, Laser Blast is the last appearance of Dr. Forrester, not counting that DVD extra, but it's a really great farewell for him, and probably a better farewell for him than Laser Blast.
Well, Laser Blast is one of my faves, so...
It's a great episode, but I think in terms of, like, giving him a focus, like, Laser Blast didn't put too much of a shine on him, so much as it was a goodbye to the show, because it theoretically got canceled again. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I think it does what it's supposed to, which is it was always meant as kind of a gateway into the actual show for people who are not as familiar with the concept. It is a little different from your typical episode, beyond the fact that the host segments are more ambitious. The joke density is a bit different. They deliberately kind of slowed down the density because they were expecting people to be laughing in the theater, and so people would miss a lot of them otherwise. The jokes are a bit broader, which is apparently a studio note, but that doesn't make it less enjoyable. I think there's some real top-notch jokes here. They really play with the movie quite well. Mm-hmm. The music for the intro, when Mike is running on the hamster wheel, I find really, really good.
Me too. Yeah, I love that.
So you watched the movie like years after the fact then, right? Like you didn't watch the actual movie on VHS or in 1997, like the year after it came out. It was a little bit later, right?
Well, no. This was, I saw this movie when it was a new VHS release.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw it in the new releases section of Jumbo Video and thought, what is this beautiful thing? It won me over. It's funny, like, there's a lot of negative press from fans on this, which really surprised me later on. A lot of fans are not crazy about MST3K, the movie. And one point of contention was the slogan, tagline for the trailers and posters, which was, every year Hollywood makes dozens of movies or hundreds of movies. This is one of them. And that was such a dumb Zaz-style joke that I was like, okay, what is this? And, you know, as a kid who loved Naked Gun movies, that worked on me.
Yeah, I mean, I was already a fan of MST3K.
Yeah, since Bride of the Monster.
Yeah, and so just was so unbelievably excited because I had been fans of things before that were just so obscure that I knew they would never actually get attention. So for something that I'd like to actually get like some big screen attention was just unbelievable for me, and so I was beyond excited. But of course I live in Canada, so it wasn't showing in any theaters.
Oh, I thought you said I live in Canada, so I was never going to get that street legal movie.
So I had to wait until it finally got on VHS, and then I forget how I got a hold of it because I don't think any of my local video stores actually carried it. I think I actually had to just buy it somehow. But I was very impressed by it when I got a hold of it. So I mean, I can see why now. I think a lot of maybe fans don't like it because everyone knows now of the very attenuated relationship the crew had with Gramercy. And maybe that is kind of tinging people's relationship with it. And I'm guessing a lot of it is like what could have been is what makes a lot of fans a little bit bitter about this movie.
I think that's it. That's it. There's definitely some loathing towards Gramercy, and of course the head of that studio, Kelsey Gramercy. But I also think that, you know, Beth, you and I well know that fans on the internet will hate things for dumb reasons. And I think a lot of people look at this movie and go, it's shorter, and I heard that they couldn't put in as many riffs or as many riffs as they would like that would be like a little more obscure, therefore it's bad and it's bad Mystery Science. I think people came into this with a lot of preconceived notions if they read about what was going on or heard about what was going on or had that kind of sour their experience as word of the troubled production circa Incredible Melting Man, I guess, got out. And I think that's really unfair. I think this is totally fine for what it is. The real question is whether or not it was completely ill-advised to go to this cult TV show that is that silhouette show from Comedy Central and say, let's make a medium budget movie out of that. What's it going to be? What's so special about it? What's going to make this a movie? Oh, it's going to be like the show, but slightly more expensive. So, like, why did they do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
So maybe we should mention at this point that one of the things we found out after watching various documentaries is the inspiration for them actually making a movie was because their live shows were such a hit. And so they thought, wow, if this actually works in a group full of people, because I think they always imagined their audience as being lonely single people sitting alone watching their shows, which fair enough, but that it had this energy that they really wanted to kind of broadcast beyond, just live shows. And so this is a good question to ask Chris, who is the lone person on this podcast who actually saw it in a theater when it opened. So Chris, what was that like?
Yeah, you were one of 5 people who saw this in theaters, judging by the receipts.
It was definitely not a packed house. Yeah, I was living in New York at the time, and New York gets all sorts of cool things. And we got to the premiere of MST3K the movie. I got to see it opening night wearing my MST3K the movie t-shirt, which I still have and have never worn since because you got to keep your nice t-shirts nice.
Same with my Bjork concert t-shirt.
Same with my printed out photo of Jenny McCarthy.
Yeah, it was really nice. So I knew going into it that this was one of the ideas behind it, that it had been touring live and I was very frustrated I wasn't able to go to any of the live shows. But yeah, that it was a thing that was meant to be seen with a lot of other people and that it was designed with that in mind and that you'd hear other people's laughter and it would help you laugh more the way that social laughter works. It absolutely did that. It felt great. And it felt great to be in a room full of people that I didn't know who were also enjoying the movie. Because I didn't have any friends I went with. I went on my own.
Wow.
But there were lots of people there. So it was nice. It was a nice experience. I think it worked. Of course, it was only in town for a week. And it went to a few other towns. We got a nice message from somebody who got to see it out in Portland, which is great. And I think it saw a dozen cities. But that's it. And then it went out on VHS and people went back to watching it alone at home. So it never has turned into that kind of Rocky Horror cult midnight showing. Although I know that's been tried in a few places, but I don't think that part of the experiment worked because it just wasn't seen by live people often enough.
Well, that, of course, goes to Gramercy's brilliant plan to put all of their promotion and distribution attention on what they thought was going to be the big hit of the summer, Barbed Wire.
Gambled and lost there, Gramercy.
I've seen Barbed Wire more times than I've seen MST3K the movie.
Oh, okay. Well,
Under duress or just by choice?
The first time under duress, and every time since then, very much by choice. It's a good movie.
Okay. Well, I mean, yes, I think that's probably the great tragedy. If there's anything that maybe we can hold Gramercy accountable for, it's losing confidence in this movie at a certain point and not giving it the distribution that was basically the whole reason that the Best Brains people went with Gramercy in the first place, was to get that distribution.
And yet, to play devil's advocate, I can kind of see their point. This is the one time where I'm like, okay, I might understand the studios here when it comes to the production of this movie or some aspect of the release of this movie, in that you're given 2 products. One is the thing you have inexplicably greenlit, which is a slightly expensive shorter version of a TV show that's been on Comedy Central for 6 years, or a Mad Max meets Casablanca future Western about a kind-hearted stripper starring the then hottest swimsuit TV personality of all time, or of 1996 at the very least. Like, I get the thinking behind it. I don't necessarily think it was the best choice or the right choice, but like, I get it.
Well, maybe let's move on to talking about whether or not the studio is evil.
All right. Well, first of all, the studio was built on an ancient Indian burial ground. America. No, But yeah, they got a lot of notes for this movie, which is, again, the whole thinking behind this is weird, and I think I can pinpoint it to one thing. It doesn't get mentioned in any of the docs on the glorious Shout Factory Blu-ray DVD, which if you don't have, it's totally worth picking up just for all the insight into how this movie and even how This Island Earth got made. Like it's worth it as like a piece of history and like entertainment history. If you're not the biggest fan of this movie / bloated episode, or I should say truncated episode. Because I think that the only reason this movie got made is what sometimes happens in Hollywood is that studios find out that other studio heads and other producers are interested in optioning a property, and it gets into kind of a bidding war. And while there wasn't exactly too much flirting with the Mystery Science Theater 3000 people of how big a budget and what major movie they're going to make, the fact that some studios were interested naturally attracts other ones. It's just like blood in the water with sharks.
Right.
And so I think it was they decided to make a move. They gambled, as is often the case in the movie business, and they made a weird choice because, like, Best Brains' pitch of, let's make a big budget movie of the show that won't be different than the show it's not a great idea. Like, if I were a studio exec, even if I was the biggest fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, I'd be like, what do you got? What's going to be special about this? What's going to get people off their seats?
Yeah, and it's the same documentary talks about how early renditions of this idea before the live shows really came on, because they've been playing with the idea for a while, was like actually having a full out movie starring Mike and the Bots going through their own adventures. Dr. Forrester and Frank at the time was going to have like its own subplot of going to some kind of convention with other mad scientists. Like, it was like an actual movie. It wasn't even clear if riffing was ever going to be a part of it, which is like, guys, that is almost certainly not going to work.
I know that was the major contention between Jim Mallon and Joel. And what got Joel to leave the whole series was all of this about the movie. Because one of the things that some Hollywood folks were pushing for was an origin story. And a story that would end with, like, riffing of a short or something. But the first hour would more or less be a movie about how Joel Robinson was a janitor at Gizmonic Institute and eventually gets tricked into going into space. And Joel Hodgson wanted no part of that. He thought it was a really lousy idea.
It is.
And of course it is. You don't need a pilot for this show. And in fact, we kind of learned that the hard way with the new season, where they have that extended bit where Jonah gets trapped, which is a total waste of time. And the worst part of the otherwise very good new series. And that was a major point of contention. And of course, who controlled the project, Mallon or Hodgson, was another big thing. And so Joel splits. And the advantage is that conflict got resolved because, one of the warring parties is gone. But I also think having Joel in your corner fighting for, like, the creative integrity of the movie and what it should be probably could have helped them win a lot of battles that they lost in making it. But I will say, it's like, again, in terms of what they were drawing up, at least something more elaborate, because they were just talking seemingly of just spitballing ideas of, like, what would be a fun thing to do with Hollywood money if we got Hollywood money and we could really kind of show off what we could do. Let's make a movie. Let's make something magical. And they immediately go to, the thought of Kermit the Frog riding a bike. So you would have this this great escape sequence in which Crow is biking away from Nazis, which I have to say, I love that idea.
Yeah, I admit I do want to see just that.
Like, that would have been a great pre-credits teaser with, like, no context, and then you cut to, like, oh no, now it's the show as usual. That would have been a nice confusing thing, but there's no way a major studio would have let that fly.
No, not at all. I mean, and Gramercy at the time was, it was kind of a mix of prestige films and kind of weird films that you would not expect to do well. They did take chances. Like, the same year, they also did Fargo.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they also put out Barbed Wire.
And Mallrats. And Canadian Bacon. Like, they had some interesting ones that they were willing to,
With the exception of Fargo, all those movies are terrible.
I'm just saying. But what else? The Usual Suspects. So They had a few, but the mid 90s was definitely like when they were at their peak in terms of influence. Although ironically, they make more now making garbage movies than they ever did back in the 90s.
I have totally lost track of Gramercy, so I have no idea what they've put out.
So, for instance, their latest one is called London Has Fallen.
Oh no. That's the Olympus Has Fallen sequel.
So that's in 2016. They grossed 191 million on that one.
Gross.
So there you go. They figured out a formula.
Yeah, good studios just don't greenlight Gerard Butler movies. That shouldn't be done ever.
So that was what they went into it, and obviously we all know like they were told to cut a lot of jokes. The one that they legendarily got really upset about was that, when the first appearance of Scrotor, they make a joke about, it's Bootsy Collins. And they told them to cut that. And they replaced it with Leona Helmsley, which was just like, the Lorraine Bobbitt of 1996. So
what, she cut off somebody's dick?
Kind of.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
It's just like the go-to pop joke that every lazy comedian will reference. That's what I meant there.
I see. I can just see the poor writers at Best Brains going like, Judge Ito, no. Billy Corgan, no.
Yeah. So I can see like this was probably very painful for them to have to contort what they did to some extent. But then you have to wonder, were they wrong to do that? I mean, one of the things that got me most excited was that Siskel and Ebert actually rated the show on their very, they were the biggest movie critics in the 90s. Everybody knew them.
And the most adorable.
Yeah. I was so jazzed that they were actually rating the movie. I didn't think it would be big enough to get on their radar. And they both gave it 2 thumbs up. But tellingly, what they both mentioned, especially Ebert, who was kind of a conditional thumbs up, he's like, this movie's quite short, and that was a good idea. And that's the thing that fans hate the most, that this movie is much shorter than your average episode. And really resent Gramercy for going along with the received wisdom at the time that a comedy could not survive if it was longer than 90 minutes. It just wasn't done. And so they, kind of shoehorned this silly idea onto a format that couldn't support it. But even Gene was just like, I got the point. Sorry, Gene, like I'm on first name. Even Siskel said, who was much more enthusiastic, he said, after an hour, I got the point. And they were both very much of the idea that this would not have worked had it gone on much longer, because I think this is something that fans forget. And it's not everybody can handle watching an entire bad movie for its entire run. That takes a special kind of attention and a willingness to be bored that I think most people aren't always willing to do.
It took 2.5 years to make, making it the boyhood of its day. But do you think that This Island Earth, Beth, is worthy of the MST3K treatment?
Yeah, so one of the things that came out in the documentary that was made 12 years later, it was interesting because a lot of the members of Best Brain had kind of absorbed some of the criticism that they've been dealing with over the years. And one of them was that this movie did not deserve the MST3K treatment. It was a good movie. And when they were doing their press junket, that was a lot of what a lot of people said to them. It was just like, wait a minute, I remember this movie and it's really good. Why are you guys doing it? So they kind of backtrack on it a bit. Like they say, we didn't pick it because it's bad. We picked it because it, clicked all these boxes. We wanted color. We wanted a monster movie. It had a lot of interesting things. But in the movie itself, like, Forrester's very clear. This is a very bad movie. This is a stinker. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm showing it to you.
I'm feeling particularly evil because today's experiment is a stinky cinematic suppository called This Island Earth.
So I've watched, I say the back 2/3, and yeah, it is a lot better than this show would make you think. There's a lot cut that makes the movie make a lot more sense, that gives it a lot of weight and gravitas. Like, it's never clear from the MST3K cut why Ruth denies that she went skinny dipping with Cal. And
wouldn't you? Don't you remember me, Beth?
And she explains that she knows they're being watched, and she didn't want to give any impression that they were familiar in a way that might get them both in danger. And that's another thing. There's a genuinely kind of frightening moment where they're talking about the fact that they've already fried the brains of a number of the scientists there. And Cal's like, how do you know? And she just kind of ominously is like, well, just go talk to them. You know, and that was actually pretty spooky.
Now, I understand that a lot of male viewers have a real aversion to female brain fry, but don't mind male brain fry so much. You don't notice.
The plight of Metaluna is made a lot more bracing, especially so the sequence when they land is a lot longer, and Exeter explains, like, we've tried to make peace with them, and they're not interested, and you can see. And it's not clear in the MST3K cut that they've gone underground because they're just being shelled so much. So they've gone under the mantle of their planet, but that mantle has been so fully exploded that it's got holes everywhere. And I thought this is a really interesting idea, and it's also very harrowing.
And also, like, I was surprised, actually. Like, I don't think I've ever seen This Island Earth uncut and unmistied, and so my judgment of it is strictly based on this presentation. But I was really taken aback by how noticeable and how jarring the last few minutes of the movie in the theater is, because they go to Metaluna, they're there for about 2 minutes, and Cal's like, I don't want to be on Metaluna anymore. And they get in a speedy car and run away from the mutant, and the Metaluna mutant falls down and vapes away. And it's like 2.5 minutes. Yeah. It's so short. It's so insanely short. And you know something is up. Like, you can follow it, but like it's so rushed. It's so unsatisfying. Like, that plot has been hacked to the bone.
So that's not actually much longer in the uncut movie. They didn't cut very much from that at all. And in fact, a lot of the early reviews of it, of This Island Earth, complain about that. They talk about their quick visit to Metaluna, which, quote, is about as exciting as Canarsie.
That's New Yorker.
A typical bitchy line from Dorothy Parker.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a well thought through movie that has serious third act problems. And that's basically kind of my summation. Like, a lot of people claim it's the best sci-fi movie of the 50s, which is...
Boo, Forbidden Planet forever, fools.
Which I think is, like, to me at least, seems accurate based on the other sci-fi movies from the 50s I've seen.
What, have you never seen Forbidden Planet?
I haven't, no.
Oh man, it's great. All right, so you've got super stud Leslie Nielsen, and it's a remake of The Tempest, and there's a big bubble robot in it, and it's fucking great. What else do you need?
All right.
It's got a cool synth score, it's got babes galore, and much more.
Oh yeah, no, you're really selling me on it.
Yeah, the babe is Leslie Nielsen.
So this movie's beautiful, and that's another thing that people, I think, complain about as well, as the film quality in MST3K is bad. It really does this movie a disservice because it is quite gorgeous. But is it a good movie?
Yeah, I don't think a movie with this first act can be called a good movie. I will say, like, this is a fun movie to watch, judging by, you know, how it is if you're just kind of following along with the movie more than the riffs. There's, like, Rex Reason is not the best actor in the world, but I find him really charming.
Me too. I really like the guy. Like,
he's better than Ruth.
Of all the, like, know-it-all, slightly condescending male scientists we get in the 50s, he's definitely the most personable.
Yeah, compared with that wet blanket from Revenge of the Creature. I mean, my God.
Or that one with everyone living underground. The hell
the Merle Purple.
Yeah. Oof. So definitely, like, he seems like a good guy. And Exeter is really, like, he's the first build, Jeff Farrow.
Jeff Morrow.
Sorry, Jeff Morrow. And he is, like, a genuinely compelling character. Like, he seems so humane, and he's being forced to do these inhumane things. And it's, you know, that's not an easy needle to thread acting wise, and to do it in such a kooky script too, I think is really impressive. Yeah,
Exeter was the Walter White of his time. Jeff Morrow is so good in this. Like, he delivers an incredibly sincere performance. He makes everything believable. If he was not in this movie, it would fall to shreds. And, like, aside from that, you've got the doofy charms of Rex Reason. And I like Rex Reason. He's a big ham, and he's fun to watch. And he has a really goofy voice that I will never tire of.
It's like, why wasn't he playing Hercules?
Oh my God, yeah. He would have been a terrific Hercules. I've drunken from the waters of forgetfulness. It's great. He sounds vaguely like the serial killer from Silence of the Lambs. The old Ted Levine. But anyway, he's really charming. Jeff Morrow is genuinely good. I think that the professor from Gilligan's Island, even though he's not in the movie for a long time, he's, again, quite able, quite good, and shows off as like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot he can act. Right. I forgot he was a legitimate actor. I just kind of dismissed all of the Gilligan's Island cast.
Right.
Ruth's kind of a dud, but she doesn't have much to do. The Metaluna mutant, as I said in my summary, is the goddamn worst Universal monster ever. He has no charisma. He's wearing slacks. It's a terrible design. It doesn't look like he has a brain on his head that's exposed. He looks like he just has a big old butt that's just constantly shitting.
Oh.
It's awful.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want to have a monster in this movie. They were forced to. And you can kind of tell, like, yeah, here's your freaking monster.
Yeah. Not helped by the fact that they, and we mentioned this in our episode on Revenge of the Creature, that they basically got Henry Mancini to redo the Creature from the Black Lagoon music for when the Metaluna mutant shows up. Now, I have heard that Jack Arnold shot those scenes, the director of the first two Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, and according to Joe Dante, who is this movie's biggest, and dare I say only, fan, that's not true, but still. That's apparently totally false. There's no evidence for it. It just seems to be a rumor. An interesting rumor, but a rumor nonetheless. And it's a weak point. I mean, if you're going to have a monster, it's got to be at least like more colorful or cooler looking. I mean, we just saw Revenge of the Creature earlier this year, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon is a rad monster. He is king of the Universal monsters. So they had the time and the resources to make something that good.
Yeah, it's such an obvious afterthought. When it comes to monsters, go big or go home.
So in terms of, remember, we did a little marathon of the early run of Universal movies in season 8, at the beginning of season 8 of this show. And we got back-to-back Universals. Mm-hmm. And where would you rank This Island Earth? Considering, need I remind you of the 4 movies we watch? They were Revenge of the Creature, a.k.a. Gillman versus Science. Mm-hmm. The Leech Woman.
Right.
The Merle Purple. Mm-hmm. And lastly, but not leastly, the Deadly Mantis.
The movie itself is way above what those movies were. Like, it's just the production, the acting, the script, way above. So, number 1. In terms of the monster, dead last.
Oh my god, yeah. So you would even rank this behind the Leech Woman in terms of monster.
Yeah, she's way scarier.
Yeah, she's old. She's basically Estelle Getty with a blow pop. Or a ring pop, I should say.
Yeah. There's nothing scarier than bad old person makeup.
Having seen Billy Crystal's Mr. Saturday Night, I totally agree. Bad old person makeup always makes you look like a Ninja Turtle. In terms of entertainment value, I would probably put this like second, maybe third if I'm being really generous to Revenge of the Creature. The Deadly Mantis for me all the way. That was a super fun movie. And it had a rad monster who was on screen all the time. And the leads in that movie were fun, and the cast was generally more fun, despite like the excellent performance from Jeff Morrow and the doofy, lovable performance of Rex Reason here. And this movie's got great art direction when we finally get to Metaluna. But the Deadly Mantis was faster paced and way more fun, had a great monster, and Revenge of the Creature I'm just kind of leaning towards because it's got that great creature who has his revenge later on. And he's just knocking stuff over all over Florida. Yeah. He acts like he owns the place. And I kind of love any movie that's about, hey, who's worse than your average person in Florida causing damage? Why, the creature, of course. Old Gillman.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 fast facts about This Island Earth and Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie. Go, Beth, go!
The tagline for This Island Earth was, the supreme excitement of our time. The tagline for MST3K, the movie, was, every year Hollywood makes hundreds of movies. This is one of them. One of these taglines is more honest than the other.
I know you know that Russell Johnson, who plays third wheel Dr. Steve Carlson in This Island Earth, would later go on to play the professor on Gilligan's Island. Please, the world knows. But that's not all. He also played the professor in several made-for-TV movies, like the Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island. Oh, and he was in several episodes of a season of Dallas that turned out to be all a dream. Oh, that's my favorite season.
In the first act of the movie, Cal has a sidekick named Joe Wilson, or as Crow dubs him, Weedy Man. Joe was played by Robert Nichols, who had previously been in a true genre classic, the 1951 Christian Nyby/Howard Hawks horror sci-fi film, The Thing.
Sharp-eyed Misties will recognize the man who delivers the catalog to Cal and Joe as Coleman Francis, the auteur behind 3 movies featured on Season 6 of MST3K. Skydivers, The Beast of Yucca Flats, and Red Zone Cuba. A shame he didn't get involved with Cal's adventure. As a scientist, Cal's the ideal person to answer the question, flag on the moon, how'd it get there?
Very, very sharp-eyed Misties will recognize Neutron, the cat that is hanging around Cal's lab.
Oh, hairball!
Orangey, who played Neutron, also appears in Season 5 Tommy Kirk vehicle Village of the Giants. Mike and the Bots didn't recognize Coleman Francis, and they didn't recognize Orangey. Why don't they look?
Orangey may have the most impressive CV of anyone in this film. He was also in The Diary of Anne Frank, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and The Comedy of Terrors starring alongside Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, and Boris Karloff. He was also frequently on TV, on shows like Our Miss Molly, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Adam West Batman.
Orangey won a Patsy Award, which was basically an Oscar for animals, for his debut role starring in Rhubarb, a 1951 film about a cat who owns a baseball team. Orangey would win another Patsy Award for his appearance in Breakfast at Tiffany's a decade later. He was the only cat to win 2 Patsies.
One for a crime he didn't commit. We'll have more on Orangey when we cover Village of the Giants. Meanwhile, the movie includes a new door sequence, which we get to see about 1.5 times. Pay special attention to what's behind door number 2. It's door number 1. But wait, look again at door number 2. What do you see? A kind face with a bitchin' cowlick. It's a sweet tribute to TV's Frank, who had just left the show during its 6th season.
The manipulator arm Mike uses in his attempt to save the Hubble telescope have another Easter egg for fans. The switch that activates the arms is labeled Manos, and the Torgo theme from the Manos soundtrack can be heard when Mike hits the switch.
Spotted in Servo's room is a nifty Godzilla action figure. 2 of the King of the Monsters' worst cinema outings, Godzilla vs. Megalon and Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, had been riffed in Season 2.
The Bots made several jokes about the Cubs losing. When the film was made, the Chicago Cubs were in the middle of a famously long losing streak. It's said that the team was cursed by an owner of a snubbed goat who was ejected from Wrigley Field during Game 4 of the 1945 World Series against the Dodgers for being too stinky. The owner declared, "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more." And so the Cubs lost year after year until finally, 71 years later in 2016, the Cubs once again won the pennant.
When Exeter's main henchman Brack gets the interocitor to himself, Tom sings,
Now it's time for the Brack Show. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the Brack Show. Starring me, I'm Brack. It's the Brack Show. And I've got lots of good guests. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
In the early 2000s, The Brack Show finally got made, as a spin-off of sorts, to Space Ghost Coast to Coast. As if to compensate for the 1950s Brack, the 2000s Brack had almost no forehead at all.
Finally, another Bix. Remember Bix Dugan, aka Big Stupid from The Girl in Lover's Lane? Well, as Mike and the Bots riff over the credits of their own movie, they point out second assistant director Bix Scahill.
Bix Scahill and his big band.
This Bix also had a bit part in Fargo as a parking lot attendant who gets shot by Steve Buscemi. So yeah, that's weird.
And that's time.
So one of the things that struck me about the segments was that is where we get one of the most obscure references. And it's Crow singing the song A Long Way to Tipperary as he's wearing like a World War I style helmet and digging down into what is basically the trenches, I suppose. What did you think of that strange little insert there?
I wouldn't know this song if it wasn't for this movie. It was certainly my first exposure to it. I think it's cute, and I think it kind of sets something up in a really smart way, which is that, you've got the, quote-unquote futuristic look of the Satellite of Love and Crow, but you have him singing an old-timey war song. I think sets up the very anachronistic sense of humor of MST3K. It's a really smart bit in isolation that's doing more than you realize upon first viewing.
you can kind of see what gears were turning here. Like, they wanted an excuse. Like, why is Crow digging into the ship? Who does digging? Well, World War I soldiers during trench warfare, which was a very brief way that people did warfare, and blessedly it did not last long because it was horrendous. But this song is one of the nicer things to come out of World War I guess. It's a very jaunty little song.
Okay. I'm willing to say it's one of the better things to come out of World War I.
And every single battle they had, especially in England, came along with a battle song so that people could get really, hot and bothered about what war they were in at the moment. And it was usually about heroic acts or what have you. So this one is a bit odd because it's kind of a wistful love song of like a boy going off to war who misses his girl. And it has been put to a jaunty march, but this was so popular that even the Germans were singing it.
What?
Yeah. They changed the lyrics a little bit, obviously, but that is how popular this song got. It just really struck a chord. It's interesting when you look at the lyrics because even though it was essentially a battle song for the British, it's about the Irish, which, if anyone knows history, were
beloved.
Yeah. So it has kind of a strange, and Tipperary is in Ireland, right? It's an Irish town. And so the lyrics, everyone knows the chorus, it's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly. It keeps going on like that. But the lyrics, like the actual line, go like this. Paddy wrote a letter to his Irish Molly-O saying, should you not receive it, write and let me know. If I make mistakes in spelling, Molly dear, said he, remember, it's the pen that's bad. Don't lay the blame on me. So, like I said, this was a very popular song. It's basically that if you could have a theme song for a war, this is it, which just makes sense why Crow would use it. As the war went on and it became more and more miserable, a bawdier version started to come out.
Ooh.
So people would come to the front and they'd be taught a new version called That's the Wrong Way to Tickle Mary.
Ew.
Do you want me to give you the whole bit?
Yes, please.
All right.
Just the Tipperary.
That's going to be way better than anything I give you. That's the wrong way to tickle Mary. That's the wrong way to kiss. Don't you know that over here, lad, they like it best like this. Hooray pour les Français. Farewell, Angleterre. We didn't know how to tickle Mary, but we learnt it over there. So this is just like, that is how you othered people back in the day, is if there was any kind of like sexual perversion, you just projected it onto your enemy across the channel. So the French did it to the English as much as the English did it to the French. So it's still going on, even though they were ostensibly allies in World War I.
Wow. Was there some kind of like, I guess, cultural reason for using the song? Like, did it have like kind of a pop image that sometimes MST3K would be playing into? Like, is there like, say, a World War I movie or something like that this was prominently used in?
Yes, it's super prominently used in Peanuts. I'm surprised neither of you recognize it. From there, that's where I first heard about it.
Which one?
Snoopy is always singing Tipperary.
What are you talking about?
I've just dropped something into the Slack. Constantly Snoopy is referring to the line, it's a long way to Tipperary.
Now, Chris, as we know, in the true canon of Peanuts, all Snoopy can say is... No,
that's only in the show.
I believe in the TV show it also comes up a few times when he's doing the World War I flying ace. They play
it doesn't Flash Beagle.
But yeah, no, this song is continued to be popular and continued to be popular enough that it was referred to in Peanuts quite a lot. I don't know, that's why I knew it. That's why I asked, what the heck is this about? And my parents sat me down and explained World War I to me.
Now, Beth, another old-timey bit of slang is what's the Hubble? Which, of course, originates from our love of the Hubble telescope, prominently featured in this movie.
It's also a popular chewing gum.
Yes, Hubble Bubble.
Yeah, I do remember there's a lot of attention around the Hubble in the 90s, basically because it was one of the most expensive pieces of equipment ever made, and it didn't work, at least initially.
Well, it was like, what, $1.5 billion to send this damn thing up?
Which is a lot at the time.
It's also a lot now. I think it's safe to say. I've never accidentally mislaid $1.5 million while sitting on the couch. Yes, but a lot of hay was made about the alleged uselessness of a Hubble telescope, but nothing could be further from the truth.
I do remember vaguely, you might know a little bit more about this, that they fixed it by basically giving it glasses.
Yes. And it's funny is that much like I only became aware of It's a Long Way to Tipperary via this movie, at roughly around the same time in Newfoundland, we finally started getting the Fox network when I saw this movie. And so I was introduced to a delightful little program that frankly still holds up most of the time called Eek the Cat.
Yeah,
Eek the Cat totally rules. And there is a running joke throughout the entire run of the show of the Hubble telescope getting busted very easily. And later on in the show, they add a giant pair of glasses taped on. So it has these kind of like nerdy looking horn-rimmed glasses on it. And that's the only way I came to know that's like, oh yes, that's more or less how they fixed it.
Yeah, it was the same problem with why people need glasses. It's just that the light isn't hitting the back of your eye in the proper way. And same thing, like they just needed to focus the light into the telescope in a more precise way. So essentially it just needed another focusing lens.
Well, that was used for many an amazing thing. For instance, the Hubble has apparently helped us figure out more or less the age of the universe. We know, which we previously did not know, that the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, crossing out my bet of 5. I thought it was 5 billion, and I lost a lot. I lost approximately $1.5 billion.
I was going to say 5 years
of my life, yes. I made a bet with the Wishmaster, I guess. But it was super useful, and it took some great photographs, some of which are up on the NASA website, and it also helped us discover that there were like other moons in Pluto. 4 of the 5 moons that are around Pluto we discovered thanks to our old pal, the Hubble.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece of equipment. Of course, I think everyone's really knows the nebula pictures, which are incredible.
Oh, yeah. From some photos with the Hubble telescope, you can actually see like changes, seasonal changes with the planets, like notably with Jupiter. Like you can see outside in its atmosphere, there are like changes of color. So you can actually see like there's like an incredible kind of view of like Jupiter surrounded by what appear to be just like millions of red specks. It looks incredible.
Well, we should all go check that out.
Yeah, more respect for the Hubble. Shame, writers of Mystery Science Theater 3000 and or Eek the Cat.
Well, I mean, so the Hubble was a bit of a punchline in the 90s, but one of the pieces of space equipment I remember the most from the 90s was the Canadarm. Do you remember that?
No. Canadians in space. Unbelievable.
I actually thought that the arms that he used to remove the Hubble was a reference to the Canadarm, but of course I have to remember, nobody outside of Canada knows what this is or cares.
And I'm proof that nobody inside Canada knows or cares.
I just remember when I was a kid, like this was something that was constantly pushed on me as a young student. Like this is something that we need to be extremely proud of. We built this ourselves, and it is this really sophisticated piece of technology, and they use it for positioning satellites and repairing things on the space shuttle. It is so important. It's so important that we are calling it the Canadarm. I think it was actually called something else by people at NASA. It was only people in Canada that called it that. But yeah, just one of those examples of just, a very small mouse trying to roar.
Where's our heritage moment on the terrifying robot arms?
I am astonished there isn't a heritage moment for the Canadarm.
Yeah. It was on the money.
It was on the money?
It was on our 5.
No, it wasn't.
I put the image in the Slack. It was totally on the 5.
You're lying.
It is.
Chris, this is a doctored image that you made in Photoshop.
I haven't seen this 5. Do they have different kinds of 5s?
Yeah, they do. And of course, that's not like, it's got like the hollow strip, but that's not the hollow strip I'm used to. This must have been a special bill that had astronauts on it.
The current $5, look in your wallets right now. The current $5 bill has the Canadarm.
Look in your hearts. Now, Chris, I understand that you were so fascinated by the source material for this Islander that you decided to start a little book club. How was reading the serial that was the basis for this film?
So it was originally some short stories that then got turned into a novel. And I think the short stories were serialized, but I think the documentary might be a bit wrong by suggesting that the entire novel had been serialized like it was a Dickens novel.
Oh.
So, I don't know. Well, but I will tell you this. This Island Earth, the novel, it's not good.
No.
There are a few differences between the book and the movie. For one thing, Exeter isn't named Exeter. He's named Yorgos Navarra?
What? That's dumb.
Or maybe Jorgos Navarra. You don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's no pronunciation guide. Yeah, it's ridiculous. You can see why they changed that. There is no trip to Metaluna. They go to the moon, and they refer to it as Luna, but they do not go to Metaluna. Whatever. Point is, there's this big interstellar war happening, and they need the interocitors, which you might have noticed are not just communication devices, but are also weapons. So they're setting up on Earth because Earth turns out to have the right climate to make a lot of them. And Cal is put in charge of the factory to make interocitors to help in this battle. And why does Cal agree to run the factory? Well, because eventually there's a very likely chance that this battle will spill over onto Earth, and Earth might get destroyed in the process. And in fact, that's where the name of the movie comes from, which is the thing that I had always wondered, because you watch the movie and it's like, why is it called This Island Earth? What is islandy about it in this?
Oh, I just thought it was like corny science fiction poetry, like Star Trek episode titles like The World is Hollow for I Have Touched the Sky.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought it might have been a reference to Milton or something, but no, the idea is that like an island in the Pacific Theater in World War II, larger forces that we primitive Earthlings will not understand are coming by, and a war is going to happen and take over us, and we're going to be put to work by the aliens who come in order to stop this war from happening and progressing and destroying us. We're like an island nation in World War II.
Whoa.
Heavy.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever been to Tipperary, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. And thanks again to all of our Patreon supporters. You can be cool and support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits from this episode and many older ones by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/39.
Well, Chris, we've meteoroided all of our Metalunans. What are we watching next time?
Well, we've explored the contours of this island Earth, but what if we got to know it a little better? What if we got to know what it was really like, deep within? What if we explored the heart of this beautiful planet we're podcasting from by watching Season 11, Episode 14, At the Earth's Core?
Woo!
Yay, a newish one.
Hey, a Peter Cushing movie. This will be fun.
I know nothing of this, but Adam seems excited, so let's go for it.
Yeah, it's got Doug McClure in it. And why, if I didn't know better, it's almost as though we're gearing up to talk about the new season by watching the last episode of the previous one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, At the Earth's Core, Beth, is based on a novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, more famous for Tarzan.
Oh, so it's going to be terrible.
Well, you say that, but you know who else, in addition to Doug McClure and Peter Cushing, stars in this movie?
Caroline Munro!
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh, okay, I'm back.
She does not have as many cool outfits. And she's not dubbed by Candy Clark. So there's some drawbacks.
Well, I think you'll enjoy this episode, Beth. In the meantime, until next time.
Thanks for giving us a chance to explain why we like this movie, and we hopefully gave you 13 Rex reasons why.
And remember, no Brack is an island.
And may all your views be normal. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Hubble bubble.